Mark Rogers TV, rating and ranking every schedule in college football. That's all the Power Fives plus the major independents, 68 all the way up to number 1. All right, check out our initial video where we explain the process in terms of ranking the conferences and then looking at the division games. And then it's so important to look at the non-division games. Who do you play? Who don't you play? And then, of course, the non-conference games and the toughest stretches within that schedule and the home and away comparison. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, and subscribe to my YouTube channel at MarkRogersTV. And join me on Podbean, where you get the audio versions of all our college football content. Go to Podbean or iTunes and look up Mark Rogers TV. Okay, we have arrived at the second most difficult schedule in the Big 12 and number 32 in the country out of 68 teams. So take everything I just said off the top, but throw out the non-division games, because we're talking about the Big 12 where everyone plays everyone. We have no divisions. We've got 10 teams, and they play a 9-game conference schedule. Therefore, everybody plays everyone. So follow me there. Basically, everybody plays the same schedule, except they don't play themselves. Therefore, for example, Oklahoma gets the break of not having to play themselves, and they get Kansas. And the difference between the Oklahoma and Kansas schedule, top to bottom, is that Kansas has to play Oklahoma, and they do not get the benefit of playing themselves. But basically, it's the same conference schedule in the Big 12, top to bottom, but you give a lean to those worse teams that have to play the better team and don't get to play themselves versus the Oklahomas and Oklahoma States that don't get the benefit of missing the lesser teams in the conference. So in addition to that, for Texas Tech here with the second most difficult schedule in the Big 12 and 32nd in the nation, what it comes down to for Texas Tech is, number one, they're not one of the better teams in the Big 12. That's my projection. Number two is that they play two semi-difficult games out of conference. Remember Oklahoma last year taking on Houston, neutral site game to open the season, then later at home against Ohio State. Well, not that difficult for Texas Tech, but in comparison to the rest of the teams in the Big 12, they're the only team in the Big 12 that is playing two like Power 5 teams, only one of them technically a Power 5 team, the other a group of 5 in Houston in Week 4. So for Texas Tech, in addition to the Eastern Washington game, and then the open date doesn't even help them much because, sure, it's in preparation of Arizona State, but it's not at a point in the season in which they have to recover from injuries, most likely. It's a week 2 bye week for Texas Tech. Doesn't help them a whole lot as much as the other teams in the Big 12. So it's Eastern Washington out of conference, and then the two difficult games out of conference with Arizona State returning the trip that Texas Tech took to Sun Devil Stadium last year. So that game in Week 3, game number 2, September 16th, against what the ESPN Power Index considers the number 40 rated team in the nation, the Sun Devils of Arizona State. And then the very next week, Texas Tech has to go on the road to take on the Cougars of Houston, rated number 60 according to the ESPN Power Index. We just put that out there for information. I've looked at the Power Index. I don't necessarily agree with it top to bottom, but it is another measurement there. And one thing that we did in addition to ranking the teams on our own scale was, just for fun and giggles, looked at the ESPN Power Index, rated everyone based on that, and then did a point system to see what the ESPN Power Index would consider to be the toughest schedule through number 68. So Arizona State, Houston, and then the opener in the Big 12 for Texas Tech is a date against Oklahoma State in Lubbock. So that's one of the toughest stretches for Texas Tech right there. Certainly Arizona State, Houston on the road, and Oklahoma State in weeks 3, 4, and 5. And then later in the season, to finish things off, the Red Raiders go to Oklahoma. They've got Kansas State at home, then on the road to Baylor, TCU, and then at Texas. So Oklahoma, Kansas State, Baylor, TCU, and Texas to conclude 2017 for Cliff Kingsbury and company. Texas Tech has the second most difficult schedule in the Big 12. It's number 32 in college football. We need to hear from you now. Again, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and we will discuss and debate college football right here at Mark Rogers TV.